Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this grief library update. I am Susan Cadell, and I was very happy to watch last year's launch of the Valley Hospice Foundation Grief Library. And so for this year, for a grief gathering, I thought, let's find out what the year has been like. So here you are for the update, and I'm glad you've joined us. And whenever you're watching this, it's we're recording this at the end of September 2025. And yeah, so that's me. I'm a co-founder of Grief Matters, and a huge fan of libraries. So this is totally, a grief library is totally up my alley. So yeah, how about each one of you introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll jump in. Since I'm a librarian, I'm all about libraries. So my name is Terri Milton, and I volunteer with the Valley Hospice Foundation as the grief librarian. I am sitting in the grief library space, which is situated in Coldbrook, Nova Scotia. For those of you watching, that's in the Annapolis Valley. It is near Kentville, near where the Physical Valley Hospice building is situated, which is on the campus of the Valley Regional Hospital. So we're in close proximity to the good work that happens in the hospice, and I've been involved with this project for about a year and a half now.
Awesome.
And I'll introduce myself. My name is Sarah Scott, and I am not a librarian, and I'm not a library person. But it's part of how this project even came about because I'm not a library person, and so even on those early days, uh, it was divine serendipity that Terri was sitting on the board of the foundation, and I simply asked for like 6 books, and called it a grief library because what else do you call 6 books? That so. But when the word library is spoken to the people who get what libraries can do, it was like creativity just sort of poured onto this project, totally in a very surprised ways. And so so my role in the project, I work at Valley Hospice, and I support the Foundation for Grief Support. And who I am in the project, I'm sort of a little bit of a matchmaker. I'm out in the world. I'm out traveling in people's homes in the community with the Inspired COPD program. And so my role in the project is to match what's happening out in the world and throw them Terry's way because when you meet a librarian, I don't know if folks know this, if you meet a librarian, you have met the hub of a community.
Mhm.
And so this whole project has been about bringing people together, calling people around a table, bringing in different disciplines. And so what has this year been like will be a very uh, huge question because it's had such good synergy. Like it's been door opening after door opening after door opening. And for any works in not-for-profit, you know that that's not always the case. Where things die in board meetings or and under committee. But this hasn't been the case for this project. There's been such a community vibe, and I can't believe, Terri, you're right. The fact that this has only been really a year and a half, sort of 2 years since that very first text message to now, it's incredible to see what's happening now in the community.
It absolutely is. It is incredible. I actually thought, Terry, when you said that, you were going to say many more years, but so
Yeah.
yeah, kudos,
Wow.
kudos.
But let's
Um,
go back to February 2024 and a board meeting. Yeah,
uh,
and I
yeah,
put my hand up and signed up for the project. And then we, over the summer, worked on it and opened it that fall of 2024. So we've only launched a year ago.
right.
Yeah.
Wow. So though we said we'd start with what's the last year been like, I actually wonder if we shouldn't do a very quick, this is what the Grief Library is update in case people haven't seen the launch video or don't know what it is. Wonder,
Yeah,
do you want to?
you're the gal to do that in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, and I want to make a correction. It actually was a November board meeting because Sarah and the then manager of the Valley Hospice, Kate Garrett, had been to the Canadian conference and had come back with this sort of, as Sarah said, 6-book notion of a grief library. And I think, again, to amplify Sarah's work out in the community, it was meeting people who, for a whole variety of reasons, out in rural Nova Scotia in particular, who were feeling very isolated in their grief, not knowing who to turn to, not knowing where to turn, not knowing how to get resources to help them in their acute grief or sometimes their long-standing grief over the loss of a loved one. And so that notion of a grief library kind of came out of that impetus to bridge that gap for rural Nova Scotians who are lacking in resources, because it's a wonderful thing to put on online webinars and courses and training, but that does not help someone who lives in many parts of this province where there is very little internet connectivity. So we wanted it to be a library in the sense of physical items that could go out to people in their home. People might not have access to transportation. They might not have access to a regional public library. They often don't have access to the internet, but everyone pretty much in the province, with some exceptions, have a mailbox. So applying what I already knew as a librarian about the brilliant work of the public library system who deliver books by mail, I knew that that was going to be one of the answers for the grief library. So Sarah and a few other members of a steering committee got together that fall of 2023, and it was in February of 2024 that the board of the Valley Hospice Foundation agreed that they would support this project. And then we built a core collection with the expertise of that initial steering group, and then continued to make purchases to build that collection. So now, as of today, the Grief Library, again, sits in Coldbrook, but we offer books by mail to any person in Nova Scotia. And we will send that mail by Canada Post, and we include the return postage for you so that when that loan is over, you just pop the book back in the mail and it comes back to us. It's that simple. It's a lot more than that, but on the face of it, it's a lending library to anyone in the province of Nova Scotia at no charge.
And I think I would
Fantastic.
add on that because even going down memory lane from a year ago, when we met at it's what is a grief library, like books. When we first met as clinicians, maternity specialists, music therapists, grief counselors, we were like, well, what type of books do we put in? Because when people say grief, immediately you think death of a person. But there are so many other layers to grief, and there's so many particular nuances to humanity, to people. We decided at the initial meeting, our first gathering of collection will be about death of a person. But very quickly we realized that if we talk about for grief for children, most often they initially meet death of a pet. So we thought, okay, well, we'll expand it to death of a pet, and then, oh, well, we'll expand it to, and so now it was always our intention to sort of broaden that that collection. So now there really is quite a range. So there are aspects of death, like not just death grief, but if grief is a natural expression of loss, what is that time of turmoil after you've lost your job, where your career is gone, and somebody at the dentist's office say, "Oh, what do you do?" And you suddenly say, I don't know. I don't have a title." It's that total immersion of loss. So we've now expanded into different aspects of loss, whether it's and that's our growing edge now. So it was that death of a person, whether it was a spouse, a child, a parent, but now it's that broader range of grief that we're looking into. Also, another important aspect from that very early days of curation was cultural sensitivity. And cultural perspective, because in those early days when we were looking at this, I was speaking with people in the African Nova Scotian community about what does grief look like in your community. We have folks who were in the Indigenous community. It's like, well, how is grief expressed here? And so now we have this collection that has spiritual sensitivities, cultural sensitivities. We had this beautiful book that talked about like the Vietnamese culture. As so many people came to Nova Scotia from Vietnam in the late 70s. There was this book that talked about that mother's journey and like what she had done, and now was passing, and it's like what a niche community of people who were grieving in one little book that's for generational. So what is grief? It's a big open question, and that's what we're looking at now is that taking down barriers of accessibility, and we'll probably talk about the playback books, and also in a range of topics, so that we have books that are specifically for Muslim faith, books that are specifically for Christian faith, Jewish faith, and have that that lens, which isn't as predominant in a public setting, like to have a really we found it hard to find Baha'i materials because it's such a niche publishing group. So that's our goal, is to really create a sense of welcome, inclusion, taking down those barriers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And of course, a public library isn't going to specialize in grief. They might have a few grief books, but you have a depth of grief books. That's what I love. You've identified a need in the community and you've met it. And so I'm just going to put it out there. So let's start talking about the last year. And you were already on my radar because I was so excited about the idea at all, and then the launch. And then we ran into each other at a conference where you won an innovation award. So just in case you weren't going to toot your own horn, I was like, the Grief Library won an innovation award. So like, because
And
it
the
is
Nova
so
Scotians,
innovative.
at that that international conference, the Nova Scotians were tooting the horn from the back row. They're like, there's like
Yes,
celebrations
yes,
everywhere.
yeah,
There was a
yeah,
good spirit in
yeah,
the room, that's for sure.
yeah. So, yeah, so you're welcome to talk more about that award. You may have won other awards, but I just wanted to make sure that that got said because it isn't just that you're doing something innovative, you're also being recognized outside of the province on a national and that was an international conference on a national and international scale. And you were in competition with international groups as well. And you won. It was, like, yay, I was rooting for you. It was so great. So, yeah.
It was a great spirit in the room. And even Terri and I, like, as we were approaching, because it was a type of award where we were nominated among other people who were nominated, but then at the conference, we had to sort of give our pitch and it was voted on in the room. So we kind of had to bring our game. And I know Terri and I wrestled, like in our private little hotel room there, we wrestled with those inner ideas of, is this actually innovative? You know, is is this like innovation award worthy? Because as Terri said, public libraries have been doing books by mail, and a library. I mean, isn't this kind of the opposite of innovation? Like, isn't this kind of going back in time to print media? But there's a vibe out there. Like, even I saw a friend posted the other day, totally on a different topic, but he put it. He said this might be controversial, but I think that print media is around to stay, which is very funny to think that that's a controversial thing to say these days, but. At that award, when we were awarded it, the judges said that this was a beautifully analog idea, and I think there's something about that's what made, I don't know, I think that was a bit of the buzz in the idea, because it was common sense, put the cookies where the children can reach them kind of idea. Like, it wasn't rocket science, it was connective. And if there is something that this world needs now, like the 70s song says, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. What Nova Scotia needs now is connection. If I could wave a wand and give anything, that's what I would do, like a strong bond of connection. And so this was allowing, somebody who, in that very rural state, because if your spouse dies and they're the driver, you're pretty much cut off. So there was a real synergy about it, but we went into that award with a little bit of imposter syndrome, thinking that this wasn't really that innovative. But everybody in the room was like, "No, it is."
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. It's innovative and analog, but it's also that the energy behind your particular project, because I remember the story about putting out a wish list, and it was some kind of like adopt a book kind of
Um,
funding program, and it like
yeah,
sold out in 24 hours. Like,
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
that
well, in that
people signed
initial
on.
round the table conversation, it's like, do we buy these books ourselves? But it's like, it just felt like the right thing to do. It's such a people want to give. Like, and people have a hunger to give too. Like, and so even though if we look across Canada, charitable givings is down, volunteerism is down. However, like there still is an earnestness in people's heart to contribute. And it's such a concrete idea for somebody rather than putting one person said to us, I like to give because I don't feel like I'm putting a drop in a bucket. I feel like I'm buying a very specific thing. And so in the Adopt a Book campaign, a grandparent, is able to buy a book for a child. Do you know what I mean? Like, and pick out a book. And so that Adopt a Book campaign, I think we knew that it was going to catch on because we would, participate in something like that. But I think Terri was not expecting the administrative overload of like, I've got to add more books to the list.
Yeah, I did. I had to. I launched it and, went to bed and got up in the morning and of course compulsively checked that it was still up and running. And I thought it was broken. I thought the whole link had been fouled up, but it was because the list was now empty because it had been purchased overnight. So I fainted. And we put out a social media post about it and added a few more books to the wish list, and those all got purchased. So the appetite for that was certainly there. And I think, again, over the year, we haven't done another Adopt a Book campaign, but I think, as Sarah said, as we expand our scope of our collection a little bit, there might be an opportunity for an Adopt a Book in the future. And I don't want to plant that seed and guarantee it, but I think it would be something because there's something to have a collection, and there's something to kind of own a little part of that collection and that you helped build it. And you tell people that you adopted a book for this collection. So that sort of organic community hug that we got for the collection was really, really gratifying. And the motto that we keep coming back to is we're on to something. We keep kind of looking at one another and saying, we're on to something. This is really resonating with people. And I can also attest to the fact that when we receive books back in the mail after someone has loaned them, there's very often a thank you card. And we keep those because they are such a testament to the work that we're doing to connect with people, as Sarah said. People who grieve think their grief is unique and no one else could possibly understand. And then they discover that an author has written that very book because they have had an eerily similar experience and they've written about it and they've written with their heart, and that speaks to people. And so when we get these thank you cards back, we know that we've made that difference for a person who might have felt quite isolated before that.
That's awesome. And I'm a researcher, right? So I like the idea of evaluation, but the idea of people spontaneously evaluating your service, like you can't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of, I mean, Sarah, you gave an example of like a grandparent adopting a book for a grandchild, but it's not just for the grandchild, it's for all the grandchildren, right? Like if it's a children's book, like that's what's so generous about it,
Yeah.
is that it might be, dedicated, or I don't know how you do it, but like it might be that intention, and it's for everyone else too.
Mm.
And I just gotta say, because my mother is she's retired now, but she's a children's librarian. She's trained as a children's librarian, and children's books are not just for children.
No.
Oh, no.
Children's books are just wonderful for all of us. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. But
The book
so
that
it was
the book
great.
that helped me, sorry, the book that helped me the most with my father's death was a children's book.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And last year at the grief gatherings, I did a reading at Halifax Public Library of the children's book about wind phones, because that's the only book that I know of about wind phones, and it tells the story of wind phones, and it's supposedly a children's book. It's an illustrated book, but wind phones are for everyone of all ages. So yeah, it's
Yeah. Another group that I found very interesting that we weren't initially thinking of the library serving, because it's that at first it's that very individual. I've had a loss. Here's an author to meet that loss. Is equipping clinicians and frontline caregivers. So if you think of a pastor in a church in Nova Scotia, they're often the people who receive grief and trauma, who are called into a room, and have to deal with a wide range of topics, where there might not be a whole lot of experience versus someone who's very specialized. And so to be able to give a pastor access to all of this, so they don't have to have a book um, of how to navigate, they don't have to have all the books. So I think of my social worker friends who have said, oh, thank you, because I don't have to have all of the books. I can, if I have a client coming in who is a man who has experienced, multiple pregnancy losses or infant losses, like I don't have to own that book, but I can get it ahead of that. And do you know what I mean? And immerse myself in how to better help them navigate their type of loss. Even today at work, I scooted home from work because it's very noisy today at hospice. At work today, one of my coworkers said, I've got this client in the community, they're really dealing with this, complex communication barrier. I'm trying to think of solutions to be able to navigate these questions with. And the first thing that came to my head is like, oh, that saying, I've got an app for that. Feel like now in the community, I'm like, I've got a book for that. So to be able to say to this clinician, at the grief library, there's a deck of cards, and it's all the different types of emotions. Because what she was coming up against is, trying to communicate, but everything was geared towards children, like point to the happy smiley face, and like she's like, these are also
Yeah.
childish. Like, oh, there's these art cards, and it
Mm.
has these beautiful bits of artwork where an adult can look at that and resonate with one of the pieces of art that's depicting an emotion without having to have the language of I am feeling disgust. They see the image and they're like, oh, that's the one. So one group of people that I've been connecting in with, over the last couple of weeks is all of the clinicians out there of, okay, you're the front lines of trauma. Here is the resources that can equip,
Mm.
so sort of help them help this crew of people, like those nurses, those doctors, those pastors, those clinicians, social workers, and to be able to, like, this library is for them to be able to support other people in the province.
And I would add teachers into that list.
Oh yeah, teachers, the school system's a whole other a whole other
Yes,
exciting conversation, because
that's right.
we've had
Yeah.
in Nova Scotia, like anyone listening to this who lives in Nova, I mean, I assume everywhere too, but the a child loss in the community is just the pain of that spreads so wide. And and so the uses for that for teachers to be able to go into their classroom and have a conversation and support them. Also, if you think of if a child sort of the statistics on this is if you're between 1 and 18, between 1 and 18 years old, if you think of sort of classrooms, every other classroom will have somebody who's experiencing a significant loss. So like every second classroom, there's somebody who has like a death of a parent or the death of a sibling, or like a really traumatic loss. And if you multiply that across all of those classrooms, that's a lot of people who are little people who are dealing with that. And often it's those classrooms are that front line of education of how do we talk to our friend who's now coming back from being at their father's funeral? Like how do we welcome them back into our community and equipping them with language and books to be able to read in their classroom or to be able to support school counselors?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so I know that professionals are one of the sectors that you're making sure are aware of grief libraries. Are there any stories or sort of sectors of users that you've had in the past year that you want to tell us a story about?
I think for me, it's the people in different organizations throughout the province who are working in grief areas. So they are hosting death cafes and information sessions about critical illness. Um, um, Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia talking about the significant loss of the person that was when you're faced with dementia and Alzheimer's. I have a wonderful story of meeting some women at one of those functions and came to my library table afterward and said, well, our husbands haven't died. Our husbands are in nursing homes. And we assure you that we are going through profound grief about that. What do you have for us? And sure enough, I did find it. And it's called Now What? And it's a book about what happens when your loved one goes into long-term care. And it's written from a Canadian perspective, from a Canadian nursing home administrator who went through that very thing herself. So again, there's a book out there. Someone has had that experience and they've written about it. So those are the ones that crop up in my mind. And as Sarah said, sort of the word is getting out among not just the public community, but the people who are doing the work of supporting our public in Nova Scotia. And that's been a really gratifying thing. Those are the groups that come to my mind. Hearing more from clinicians, hearing more from grief alliance type of groups who are out there. Yeah, and the work that they're doing. And so many workshops and events and happenings and training around grief in this province. So trying to keep on top of that is actually quite challenging. This province has been through a lot of heavy stuff. And so this province is doing a tremendous amount of work to support grievers in all different kinds of ways. So that's been gratifying to see that our message is getting out to those. And the award certainly helped because there was quite a flurry of media attention when we came back to Little Nova Scotia with this international award. It was newsworthy, and that really did help us get the word out. Some of the challenge of getting the word out is because we are still trying to really reach that analog audience. And so that's something that we've been really trying to think about over the past year. And I'll talk a little bit more about a project that we're working on through the auspices of a Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association grant that we received. So yeah, that's what comes to my mind.
I think one way that our collection has really grown is by the questions we have received from people.
Yes.
So, I often say, like people say, oh, that they think the library's a great idea. Like, here are the things that you can do to make this library even better. We had one person who, I got the question, how do I explain grief and death to my autistic child, who is an adult, but functions on a different level of communication? How do I explain to them that dad has died and, isn't coming home? And I thought, oh, uh, how? So like,
Exactly.
but because of that beautiful question that was asked in such sincerity, we now have resources for people on the autistic spectrum disorder. We have resources for families. So then later down the road, months later, when we get another question, all of a sudden we'll be like, we know the answer. Like, oh, not we know the answer. Here we can help with that.
We have
So
a suggestion.
when a chapter of I'm not sure what the proper title, Autism Nova Scotia, it was a local chapter. She
Yeah.
was looking to resource a family.
Mm.
It was a questions like that that are exploratory and open, that
Yeah.
help with the library. Another thing, the great thing that people can do for the library is to use it.
Yes.
So there is a bit of hesitancy. If I could say that, well, the one problem with the library I find is there's a bit of hesitancy to borrow the books,
Yes.
because there is a worry that it's like pie sharing. If I take this, then other people won't have it. And so there's a worry that if I borrow from the library, then it's not available to someone else, and they might need it more than
More.
me.
That's what I hear more than anything is
All the time,
someone
because
else
there's
may
these
need this
these
book more than I do.
and because it's because
Mm,
when you're in the grief, you might not be able to read. Like, reading is
correct.
very hard. Well, and so there's a book called The Grief Brain. When you're in it, it's hard to read. When you're next to it, you might be the perfect person to borrow the book, because the person who is in the epicenter might not have the brain width to read it, but you can read it, and so that you can support them. Also, it proves because sometimes people will come up to the book table, like we're doing an event, and they'll take pictures of the book, because they'll say, well, I'll go home and I'll buy it, for my grandchildren, which is fine. But I'm like, you can just take, just take. If people are borrowing the book, then it shows that there's a need, which will generate, more energy for the support of the program.
Mhm. Mhm.
Also, if you borrow the book, that book is not gone. When somebody else requests it, or if someone else sees it, they just see that it's out. We have a great system of, holds, where as soon as we get this book back, we'll know that you would like to have it. And so you're not holding back from anybody. Also, Terri, the librarian that she is, buys multiples of like the hot ticket items.
Yeah.
So if there's like a real hot interest book,
Yeah.
borrow it and use it.
Use
So
it.
the thing to help the library is ask the questions, ask an exploratory question. Just write to Terri at library@valleyhospice.ca. Ask her, because
Yeah.
she is like a dog with a bone. So, she'll hunt things up to find resources for you. It gives us
Mm.
pleasure to be able to
Yes.
answer people's questions and find resources for them, and to actually borrow books, bring them home, test them out, and borrow them before you're in grief. Talk early, talk often.
Mhm.
Get them for your kids when they're toddlers. Get the storybook boards, get the age appropriate ones. And because grief is the one, Sue Smiley was talking about this the other day. Grief is the connectivity we all share. Everyone taps in. And so why not have the conversation while the waves of the ocean are calm? So borrow the book, read the book,
Mm.
and explore,
Mhm.
ask questions.
That's right. I mean,
That's such great advice. I gotta say,
yeah.
that's fabulous.
And
Yeah.
it's wonderful to have all these books on the shelf. I'd rather have them out in your hands than here on the shelf. They're not doing any good sitting right here. I'd
Yeah.
rather that they are out. And as Sarah said, if we get lots of demand for a particular title through the generosity of the Hospice Foundation, we have capacity to buy more copies and make sure that those get out there. So I track that as a librarian and just monitor it. And we don't buy multiples of every book, of course, but the ones that are in demand, you don't have to worry that someone else will go without it. So, yeah.
That altruistic spirit is lovely. Absolutely lovely. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Um,
I
okay,
do want to
sorry, go
touch,
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I want to touch on some of that connectivity piece that we've been talking about, how sort of being alone and isolated in your grief is not necessarily a good thing, even if you do have a resource and you're reading it, but you're not actually out there speaking to anyone else about it. One project that we developed for one of the Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association grants was the notion of a grief book club. So that is intended to get people coming together, and you don't have to be a professional. You do not have to be a grief counselor. You do not have to have some special expertise to talk about it, because as Sarah has referenced, grief is the price of being human. We are all going to go through it. And wouldn't it be comforting to be able to talk about it? So we developed Grief Book Club in a Bag, and we were awarded one of the grants through NSHPCA. Thank you very much. And we've been working on building those kits, and I have an example of what that looks like. So we have C.S. Lewis, who wrote A Grief Observed after the death of his wife, and it's his raw, searing, uncensored grief. So we get 6 copies of that book. We get a large print copy of it. And we also, where we can, we get what's called a playaway audiobook version of the book, which does not require an app, does not require a device. It's a self-contained audiobook. We even give you the earbuds to listen to it. So if you are not able to physically just deal with reading a book, you can listen to a book with a cup of tea while you're looking out the window. Some people prefer an audiobook to a print format. And then we include discussion guide. And this one has its own discussion guide that was published. So great prompting questions for you as a group to talk about this book together, and all in a lovely cotton Valley Hospice Foundation bag. So this loans out to you anywhere in the province. And we're starting to have some initial conversations with the public library, who, of course, do book club in a bag. So they have been more than happy to share their expertise with how they run book club in a bag programs. And we're hoping for some positive news on the horizon about getting these kits out across our provincial, regional public library system for people to borrow. So, and again, at no charge.
That is so cool. That is so cool. I did not know the playaway thing existed
Yeah.
because I was thinking about audiobooks because I am a knitter and I love to listen to a book and
Yes.
knit, right?
Yeah.
So that's so cool.
You're preaching to the choir there. I struggle to read. You know, like I
So
listen while I do the dishes, I listen while I knit. And what I love about this is that you don't have to have a CD player. You don't have to
Ah,
have a tape deck. Like you don't have to have any particular device. Like honestly, you just borrow the thing
yeah,
and it plays the book.
yeah.
yeah.
And sometimes audiobooks are better. I listened to Krista Couture's How to Lose Everything book, and she's a singer-songwriter. And so when she references her songs, she sings them in the audiobook, right? It's
Oh, beautiful.
beautiful.
You know, Mike,
And
you're
it,
talking
it
about Robert Munch because of his grief has been in the conversations about his looking towards his death, and him singing "I'll Love You Forever" was transformative for me because I'm like, oh, that's the real You know,
That
I've been making up
sounds,
my own melody for
yeah,
years. I was
yeah.
like, and that melody from the author's own soul, you know,
Mm,
like was beautiful. So that's the
mhm.
tune I have in my heart. So I'm really glad that we have those. And so we have, I think I'm right in saying, Terry, we have a couple of different titles for those book in the bag. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
but, but that was just an example of the one. I
Yeah.
think those are going to be a hit.
We our goal with the grant was to have 11 of those, 11 different book club in a bag. And we were thinking, and we're still thinking and talking about, one of those might be a mixed bag of 10 different children's books, because exactly as you said, Susan, children's books can help adults talk about their grief. So wouldn't it be neat for a group of 8 people to get together, or 10 people to get together, all with different children's titles, and then come back and talk about those children's titles together as a group, because it can be such a gateway to talking about your own loss. Yeah, so that's one idea that we.
That's a fabulous idea. I'm in a book group, and one of my favorite memories is when somebody will stop and read. I've actually had one of our book group members like read us a children's book, but also the idea of having different books, because some of our most memorable meetings have been read a biography or an autobiography, and then bring it and talk about it, or bring your favorite cookbook, the one that influenced you.
Yeah.
And so that variety can be
Yeah.
fantastic. And so that, yeah, the grief,
Yeah.
or even a mixed bag of non-children's books too,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
all kinds of, and we, oh, that's just a fabulous idea. Bravo. Well done.
I
See, you're
think,
innovating. You're
yeah.
innovating. You keep on innovating.
What I think about too is another community that we haven't really talked about is people who are dealing with a life-altering illness. So there's been a diagnosis. And again, people are out writing about this experience of navigating your way through a life-changing illness or a life-changing diagnosis. You know, from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's to cancer to MS, you know, things that change your life. So even that would be, you know, an idea about coming at different perspectives. Yeah. So yeah, just brainstorming aloud here in this recording, but yeah, that would, those kinds of resources come to mind.
Hear often is like how to express this to the kid. If you know death is imminent, at what point do you talk about this? How do you include people early and often? And serious illness. Also, MAID has changed the landscape of Canadian grief in a very fundamental way. It is often a conversation that is feels perilous to even enter into, because you have to gauge among your friends and peer groups what their opinion is, even as you are expressing your own experience with. And so sometimes there is a feeling of lack of safety around talking about grief that comes with a MAID death, because there is a little bit of heat underneath the surface for it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole, and we've brought in a number of books to the library that support a range of perspective, because that's important for people to be able to have access to and to explore, and also for different ages. So to be able, I remember when my kids came home from school and they said, well, my teacher isn't going to be there because his dad's death is coming this Tuesday. And they were just like, how does he know that it's going to be on Tuesday? But navigating the complexities of grief and medical assistance in death is something. And there's a lot of, because this is a very Canadian issue. There's Canadian publishers. We have a lot of Canadian publishers across the library. Like Terri has really been really great at curating that. But there's been a lot of Canadian voices coming forward for MAID and grief.
Yeah, and I have a few of those here. The Last Doctor, This is Assisted Dying, both written by doctors who offer MAID as a service. The Many Faces of MAID and What You Need to Know. And this one is just beautiful, Something Not Nothing. It's a graphic novel, beautifully illustrated, in which Sarah Levitt's partner opts for MAID due to her terminal illness. And we are now seeing books for children about MAID, because MAID is available enough in Canada that it's now about having conversations with children whose loved one is going to be gone next Tuesday, because that is their death date. And people have written about it because people have experienced it. And those books all of those books geared towards children and teens and MAID are out on loan right now. So they're out there doing some good in the world right now. So
That's
those
awesome.
conversations are happening. And so those books are out there to support that. So very gratifying. So every book loan tells a story of someone's experience with grief and loss. When I get the initial email and it's multiple paragraphs long, I know that that might be the first time this person has told their story of grief to me, a relative stranger. And as Sarah said, there's a safety risk element about sharing that story. And because I don't know them and I don't have any assumptions, it's a real honor and a privilege to be that safe space where someone can tell me their story and I can listen and I can respond and I can send something that might help.
Awesome. I was going to ask if you had graphic novels, and you
Yes.
do. You just gave an example of one. So
Yeah, graphic novels for sure. And
that's awesome.
yeah, they're really, really helpful. There's a couple more that come to mind and they've gone out on loan very often. So yeah, it's a popular format for sure.
Well, and
there's
I
some
think
beautiful ones too, like on for children whose grandparents like have dementia too, like understanding when they can't say their name anymore, like or just depicting like the graphic novels. I mean, they hit you in
Yeah,
the field because it's just like you're able to communicate with art in a way that transcends English language so beautifully.
Well, and you mentioned the grieving brain, Sarah, and I mean, I don't know, but like for some people, they might be easier to kind of read than, just print on a page. And of course, shout out to Susan McLeod, the cartoonist in residence for Grief Matters in proud Nova Scotian, who also wrote Dying for Attention, which is a graphic novel about her mother in a nursing home, which is absolutely beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share other than please borrow books if you're in Nova
Use the
Scotia? Because I
library.
want you to say that you're expanding to the rest of the country, but I know that's a big ask right now.
One day at a time.
Well,
One
yeah,
book.
and we have heard from other provinces who are interested in this project. Certainly at McGill at the International Palliative Care Conference, we heard from other countries who were interested in what we were starting at the time. I do want to mention that we do have a print version of our catalog, thinking about, again, folks who may come into, for example, their public library. So here in the Annapolis Valley Regional Library, each branch of the library has graciously put our print catalog in their branch. We're about to send them an updated version of that catalog. So that is there as yet another analog way that people can connect with our collection. And hopefully we'll be able to send those print catalogs to the other regional library systems as well, so that sort of provincially we can have representation at all of our branches. So public libraries.
If you're a clinician and you'd like a copy of that print catalog, just let us know. We're not doing the mass distribution because they do cost a little bit to print up because they're codes. So if you're the type of person who's constantly resourcing, so we've sent this like to the IWK, like to the bereavement coordinator there, who'd be always photocopying, like, oh, you should try this book. If you're somebody who's a hub kind of person, just ask us for one of those. I have a little thing. I want to give a shout out to Terri, and because I know she's not going to toot her own horn. Just this week, Terri was awarded the Norman Oryx Award for Library Leadership. This is a Nova Scotia award for innovative, for lasting contribution to the community. And so this was among all of Terri's peers. They were like 2020, 2025 award winner. And I just can't express the tireless work that Terri has put in as a volunteer to get this off of not only off of the ground, but in a in a building. So we want to give a shout out to her work and her dedication and for the hours that she puts in, because the province is celebrating her
Congratulations.
and we're celebrating along. So toot
Woo.
toot to that horn.
Toot toot, yoo-hoo.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was lost for words when they called. I thought they were calling to ask me to come and speak about the Grief Library, but the Nova Scotia Library Association contacted me to let me know I was the recipient of the Norman Horrocks Award. And Norman's special to all of us in the library world. Speaking of tireless champion, Order of Canada for his work fostering and promoting and celebrating and edifying libraries in this province, but really in North America. So an astonishing person, left us too soon in 2010. So it's an extreme honor to get an award in his name. So yeah. And again, it's that validation of we're onto something here. You know, this project is speaking to people. It is meaningful to them. And it's because we're all human and we all experience loss. We all experience grief. And to have a resource that's focused on that area specifically to complement what public libraries are already doing to fill some of the gaps that they may not be able to fill because they have a mandate beyond belief. So it's really gratifying to see this work resonate.
Oh, that is so fantastic. Well, congratulations, Terry. That's really great. And yeah. Any last words before we wrap up? This has been wonderful. It's been so fun for me, and I've been following along, and we've talked before, and I've learned things today. I'm just thrilled. I'm so in admiration of what you're doing, and you collectively, I know that Terry, you work tirelessly, but there's the foundation is behind you, the community is behind you, and
Yeah.
it's not just the two of you. And I, Sarah, your advice about talk early and talk often. I mean, that's a button, that's a t-shirt, that's a hat. Like because it's
Yeah.
about so many things, but
Mhm.
so true about grief
Mhm.
because it's going to happen to all of us. And it might be, as you say, it might be something small and unexpected, like, applying for a grant and not getting it can really knock you off your feet sometimes. And then bigger losses, and I'm not to make it about size, but grief happens and loss happens. And so, yeah, talk early and talk often. It's a great slogan.
Mhm.
So
You can have it. I give it to
thanks.
you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both. This has been such a
Mhm.
pleasure. And we'll link things in the notes.
We will.
If we were really tech savvy, we would, well, there's a link here, but we're not going to do that.
Link here.
So thank you both
Thank you, Susan.
very
It's been a real
much.
pleasure. Yeah. And thanks as always, Sarah. Yeah.
As always, love to you both.
Take care.